The blizzard had turned the world into a roaring white void. We'd been crawling along the unplowed mountain road for hours, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the ice. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and every labored chug of the engine made my stomach drop lower. The fuel light wasn't just on anymore, it was a glaring orange eye of accusation. Chloe had been silent for the last 20 minutes, her face pale as she stared out at the impenetrable wall of snow, both of us knowing we were genuinely, terrifyingly stranded. That's when the headlights, weak and half obscured by ice, caught it. A sign so makeshift it seemed to have grown from the storm itself. A warped slab of wood nailed to a splintered post with the words "Gas and Lodge" hand-painted in a frantic rust-colored red. An arrow pointed down a narrow track that was already vanishing under fresh snow. It looked less like a promise of salvation and more like a warning. "Jake, I don't like this," Chloe whispered, her voice tight. But the truck gave a violent shudder and a choice was made for us. I turned, the tires sinking into the deep powder, the dark trees swallowing us whole. The place was a relic. A single-story shack of warped wood and a rusted metal roof, hunched against the storm. A single bare bulb under a tin awning cast a sickly yellow glow on two antique-looking gas pumps, their hoses frozen solid and encased in ice. The sign above the door, Lodge, was missing the L, leaving just Odge in faded letters. No other cars, no tracks in the snow except ours. The whole place was dark, save for that one buzzing bulb. It was the most desolate, unwelcoming sight I'd ever seen, but it was the only sight there was. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The bell above the door gave a dull, dying clang as we stepped into the stifling, dusty heat of the main room. It was part store, part lobby, cluttered with empty shelves and the smell of old wood smoke. Behind a high counter, a man stood perfectly still. He was older, with skin like paper and deep-set eyes that held no reflection. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look curious. He just stared, and a slow, thin smile stretched across his face. "There you are," he said. His voice, a dry rasp. "Was starting to worry you wouldn't make it, Jake. Chloe." The sound of our names in his mouth felt like a violation. We had never, ever told him our names. The air left my lungs. I felt Chloe's fingers dig into my arm. How do you know our names?" I managed to stammer. The man just kept that skeletal smile, his eyes flicking between us like we were specimens. He gestured with a thin, bony hand toward a coffee machine in the corner. "The storm always brings guests. You'll need to wait it out. The roads are gone now." His certainty was more frightening than the blizzard outside. My eyes scanned the dim room. The dust on the shelves was thick. The few canned goods had labels faded with age, and the cash register was an ancient mechanical thing that looked like it hadn't opened in decades. Nothing here was 24/7. Nothing had been open for a long, long time. "We're leaving," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. I pulled Chloe back toward the door, my every instinct screaming. The man didn't move to stop us. He simply said, "You can try, but the car won't start for you now." I shoved the door open, the blizzard's breath a shocking cold after the oppressive heat. I turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. Not a click, not a groan, just dead silence, as if the battery had been ripped out. Through the swirling snow, I looked back at the lodge. The man was still visible in the window watching us, that same patient smile on his face. He had known we were coming, and he knew we weren't leaving. Story 2. It was my third day ice fishing on the isolated, frozen-over Laurel Lake, a solo trip I took every January to escape the noise. The silence out there was usually a comfort. Just the groan of the ice and the whisper of wind through the bare trees. I was huddled in my pop-up shelter, a thermos of lukewarm coffee in my hands, watching my fishing line vanish into the black water below. The world was a monochrome of white and gray, and I felt like I was the only soul for miles. It was perfect until I saw the other angler. He was about 200 yards out, a stark, dark figure against the endless white. At first, I was just surprised. I'd never seen anyone else out here. But then I watched him. He wasn't setting up a shelter or dropping a line. He was just drilling. Methodically, with a slow, relentless rhythm, he'd lean into his auger, punch a hole in the ice, move 10 paces, and drill another. He was making a wide, lazy circle. And I was in its center. A cold knot tightened in my gut that had nothing to do with the temperature. This wasn't fishing. This was something else entirely. The metallic screech of his auger biting into the ice seemed to be the only sound in the entire world. Hole after hole, he completed the circle, and when he was done, he just stood there, facing me. I couldn't make out his face under the hood of his dark parka, but I felt his gaze. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat screaming, "Get out!" I quickly reeled in my line, my hands trembling so badly I could barely pack my gear. I shoved everything into my sled, not even bothering to collapse the shelter, and hurried towards my snowmobile, parked on the shore. The figure hadn't moved an inch. I threw my leg over the snowmobile seat and turned the key. The engine gave a single weak cough and then died. Absolute silence. I tried again, pumping the throttle. Nothing. Not even a click. The battery was completely dead, which was impossible. I had just used it to get here hours ago. A fresh, sharp panic seized me. I looked back out at the lake, my breath catching in my throat. The dark figure was gone, vanished, but his work remained. The perfect circle of holes he drilled around my spot was now filled with something black and thick, and a low, steaming vapor was rising from each one, like the lake was bleeding and breathing heat into the freezing air. The smell hit me first, a coppery organic stench, like old blood and wet earth, carried on the steam rising from those black-filled holes. I abandoned the snowmobile, my boots slipping on the ice as I sprinted for the shore, dragging my gear sled behind me. I didn't look back. I could feel it, though, a presence, a weight in the air around that cursed circle. The tree line seemed a mile away, every gasp of frigid air burning my lungs. I stumbled once, my glove tearing on the rough ice, and a part of me was convinced I'd feel a cold, hard hand close around my ankle from one of those steaming holes. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, fumbling with the keys until the engine roared to life, a blessed, normal sound. I peeled out, spraying gravel and snow, and didn't slow down until the lake was far behind me. I never went back for the snowmobile. I told the rangers it broke down, that I was lucky to get out on foot. They found it a week later, perfectly fine. The tank full of gas. They said it started on the first try. But I know what I saw. I still dream about that circle, and the feeling that I wasn't being hunted, but corralled. And I always wonder what would have happened if that engine had started just a few seconds later.
Story 3. The windscreen wipers struggled against the sleet, slapping back and forth like a metronome counting down the last hour of my shift. I'd been a postal carrier on the same rural route in the North Carolina Appalachians for going on 12 years, and that late afternoon in December felt heavier than most. The sky was the color of bruised lead, and a brittle cold had settled deep into the hollows, making the steering wheel feel like ice in my hands. My life then was simple. Wake up before dawn, navigate these twisting, lonely roads, and try to get home before dark. But that day, the final delivery on my sheet was for the old Hadley place, a house everyone knew had been empty since the family just up and vanished back when I was in high school. I pulled my mail truck onto the overgrown gravel driveway, the tires crunching on frozen mud ruts. The two-story farmhouse stood silhouetted against the gray sky, its windows boarded up and paint peeling away in long, sad curls. Something felt off immediately. The silence was too thick, absorbed by the dense pines crowding the property. As I trudged through the knee-high dead grass toward the porch, a package in my hand, I stopped dead. There, centered perfectly on the top warped wooden step, was a cardboard box. It was dry, despite the sleet, as if it had just been placed there. My own package was forgotten in my grip as I stared at the one on the porch. It had no postage, no return address, just my name, Michael Evans, and below it, written in a shaky, familiar cursive I hadn't seen in decades, was my childhood nickname, Mickey, a name no one had called me since my grandfather died. The air left my lungs in a white plume. My heart wasn't just pounding, it was doing something frantic and irregular against my ribs. How? Who? I dropped the official package I was supposed to deliver. It thudded softly on the frozen ground and picked up the one meant for me. It was light, disturbingly so, and something shifted inside with a soft, rustling sound. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Nana Evans' script, the same one from the birthday card she'd sent me every year until she passed away when I was 10. But that was over 30 years ago. This tape looked new. I ripped the box open right there, my thick work gloves making me clumsy. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed newspaper clippings, was a small, tarnished silver picture frame. The photo inside was one I hadn't seen since childhood. A faded snapshot of me, no older than 7, sitting on this very porch's swing next to my grandfather. We were both grinning, and I was holding my old stuffed rabbit, Buster. But someone had taken a fine-tipped black marker and carefully, meticulously scratched out my grandfather's eyes in the photo, leaving 2 dark, void-like holes where his face should be. A cold, deeper than the winter air, seeped into my bones. A wave of nausea hit me, mixed with a dread so profound it felt like the ground was tilting. I stumbled back from the porch, the framed photo clutched in my hand, my eyes darting to the boarded-up windows. That's when I saw it. A faint, flickering orange glow emanating from a narrow gap between the planks covering the main picture window. It was the soft, dancing light of a fireplace. And then I heard it, a sound that made the hair on my neck stand straight up. The faint, high-pitched squeak of the porch swing's chains from the far end of the veranda. I whipped my head around. The swing, which had been still and coated in a layer of frost when I arrived, was now moving gently back and forth, as if someone had just gotten up from it. I didn't even think. I just ran. I sprinted to my truck, threw the photo frame onto the passenger seat and peeled out, gravel pinging against the undercarriage. I drove straight to the sheriff's office, my story tumbling out in a chaotic, breathless jumble. They sent a deputy out to check. He found nothing. No light, no movement on the swing, and the package I dropped was gone. The official report said it was a prank, but they never could explain the photo. I still have it, tucked away in a drawer. I can't bring myself to look at it, but I can't throw it out. That house knew me. It called me Mickey. And sometimes in my dreams, I'm still standing on that porch, hearing the chains squeak, knowing I'm not alone.